it's very easy to say you can't seem to see the editor's job, which I don't quite agree. If a film works, it's the editing. It's our responsibility as an editor with the director to make sure the film is arriving where it has to arrive. I think, there's nothing to beat emotion and performance. If that's there, I'll have to put it. Even the director will get convinced and we'll find all the technology to get the focus in. I'm like, just 5%, please. We've done this. We've done it through most of our films.
Sayukta, welcome to the front row. We're really thrilled to be kicking off our Explained series with you. And the idea is really to kind of, explain aspects of cinema in a way so that regular viewers like us, our experience of the movies becomes enhanced. And today, of course, we're going to talk with Sayukta about editing. Now, the difficulty of talking about editing is that editing is the invisible art. I've often heard editors say that good editing is editing you can't see. So how do you actually talk about something that you're not supposed to notice in a movie, right? So just to kind of break it down, to begin with, just tell us, how would you explain what you do?
Hi, Anu. Thanks for having me on this. Like everyone, it's very easy to say you can't seem to see the editor's job, which I don't quite agree. If a film works, it's the editing. I strongly believe it because there are beautiful visuals, there are beautiful sound design, everything. But if a film resonates with you, it is the editing. It is the game the director and the editor have played in the editing room and got it together so that
Okay, but Sayukta, let me interrupt. That's a big thing to say, right? That if the film works, it is the editing. So I want you to explain that a little more. Why is it the editing and not, like you said, the visuals or the sound or I don't know, a great actor or a charismatic star?
As an editor, you have access to all the hard work everyone has done, whether it's the writer, whether it's the director, whether it's the actors, everyone, right? As an editor, I'm supposed to protect everyone's job, right? So, a lot of times what is written, even if it's short, it doesn't resonate on screen. At times it looks like I'm saying it again and again and again. I don't need to say the same line again and again. Maybe I can say it in scene 40 and not scene 20. It's our responsibility as an editor with the director to make sure the film is arriving where it has to arrive. A lot of times, like most of the time, the script says everything and directors are always cautious and they shoot everything they can. They get everything they want. Not always they land, right? So as an editor, I really feel it's a very responsible job because, writing is really important and they do the best they can, but not always it translates. It not always, and good writing will always give you a good film. That I cannot debate that. But a good edit can make it even more strong.
Of course. Which is why there's such a connection between the best editing Oscar and the best film Oscar. It's very rare that a film that did not get nominated for best editing would win best film. So obviously it's extremely sort of interrelated. So can you take us a little bit through your process of working, and at what stage do you usually get attached to a project?
So I've been lucky lately that I get onto projects at at draft one level or even beat sheets. Like a lot of people are writing these beat sheets, right? So I get on board at that time, and I think my directors have been very accommodating of me being so verbal and opinionated. I know that I have an opinion which I can't hide. I do try to be discreet about it, but the directors are sharp. They get it, right? And so many times, especially in this beat sheets, what's happening is it's really beautiful. Whoever I've been talking to, I don't know if this is a format with series per se, but it's something very nice where, per episode they write, this is what's going to happen with this character, this is what's going to happen. And since it goes on to like a good 500 pages, I have the plot points ready. Yeah. Right. And I can say, hey, in episode 6, I don't think your character would do this. There's a character flaw there. So I get to the beat sheet level. And once I'm on the beat sheet level, then the draft 1 comes in. And then I directly go into the last draft. At the first draft, I read the dialogues, and obviously it's their kacha work, it's my kacha work. And I'm like, okay, I shouldn't be commenting now at all. People are still working. I don't like people stepping into my editing studio while I'm editing my film. Once I'm done or ready to preview, that's when I speak. And at the last draft is what I really enjoy reading and give all my opinions. And usually the last draft nowadays at least comes like a month before they're shooting. So they still have time to gamble and play. So once that comes in, we have readings with crew, or we have readings with writers, where we are throwing ideas. Obviously, the writers are the most unhappy people when we give opinions. And, you meet them later and they're just like, hey, you just said that, And once that's done, I get onto... so now everyone just shoots. While they're shooting, we start editing. So I normally just read the draft and keep it aside. I don't learn up my script, because how else would I be distant? Because if I know exactly what's supposed to be there, then it's a trouble for me. I don't know how to cut objectively at all. So I keep the script aside and then completely breathe the footage. And once the footage is with me, I have to, because otherwise, if I'm married to anything, I find it very difficult to leave it or let go, saying, no, he said this. So that's why I just keep everyone off my radar. I'm like, I don't want to hear what's happened on set. I don't want to know anything. I don't know how much money has gone on this shot. If I get to know, I get so stressed out. I'm like, oh my God, I need to put this shot and I don't want to do this. I don't like it, And, right. and thankfully my, directors have understood this personality, and they go like, okay, I get it. Don't tell her anything. Keep her off the radar. Don't tell me continuity. Don't tell me anything. But I keep an entire film ready by the time they are back, with music, with sound, with VFX, especially with thrillers. You cannot not research sound and music of a certain space and put it together. Otherwise, how will the director see his film? And I really, really work hard on my first cuts. I make sure there is a film there, otherwise the director is going to get so nervous, the producer is going to get so nervous, and that energy comes into my edit room, and I don't like that. Yeah. So I take my time on my first cut. Happily, I'll tell them, please, you finish shooting, go on a vacation, come 3 weeks later. Let me put this together, at least somewhere. At least 50% of a film is going to be seen, viewed as a full film. I don't want it to look... I won't even have sound bumps. I'll do my dialogue editing. I enjoy doing it. I put it together, and then that's when I start jamming with the director. And usually the director is not that nervous at that stage, because I try my best not to make him nervous.
So now, Sanyukta, I want to read out Oscar-winning editor Walter Murch has all these sort of pointers for what makes a good cut. Okay, so 1, it is true to the emotion of the story. It advances the story. It occurs at a moment that is rhythmically interesting and right. It acknowledges what you might call eye trace, the concern with the location and movement of the audience's focus of interest within the frame. It respects the grammar of 3 dimensions, which are transposed by photography to 2. And it respects the 3-dimensional continuity of the actual space, which is where people are in the room and in relation to each other. Now, these were his sort of rules for what makes a good cut. But then he gave each of these aspects a percentage value. Okay, so story is 23% important, rhythm is 10% important. But the most important thing he said was emotion. 51% of the cut is a good cut if the weightage 51% is given to emotion. Now, Sanyukta, do you agree with this? And what does it mean to cut for emotion?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's a legend. I mean, I shouldn't even be contradicting him. He's also someone who's done like really emotionally strong films. Like how Sally Menke is specifically style and women centric solid films. He's like somebody who's so emotionally involved, and we've all cried through his films.
Correct.
I mean, even we've all, and they've all stayed, and he's like such a legend to hear him speak, and he's also one of those people who likes to teach you and explain to you. I mean, obviously, actually, emotion is about everything. Performance and emotion is about everything. If the film is soft focus, the film is not well lit, the film has no continuity, I don't care. It has to be emotional, seriously, because there are so many places we've had these things. If the actor has performed and the emotion is working, people see beyond that. We've all seen beyond that. There are many films which go that way.
Yeah.
We haven't got stuck with, hey, his hand isn't matching the next frame, and if you're doing that, you're not watching the film right. But I also have, like, I don't know if I could put percentage to it, but I would definitely say like more than 50% for me is emotion, because for me it's always performance, then it comes to grammar. I think I mean, there's nothing to beat emotion and performance. If that's there, I'll have to put it. I mean, even the director will get convinced and we'll find all the technology to get the focus in. I'm like, just 5%, please. We've done this. Like, we've done it through most of our films.
Tell me, Shyamta, let's talk about two of your projects, both of which I personally love. First, Tumbad. You were credited as a creative producer for Tumbad, even though you came into that film just before the last leg of shoot. You played a critical part in kind of shaping that movie, which was, I read, 240 minutes long, and then you cut it to 100 minutes. That's insane. What I really love was that the way you cut him getting richer and richer, because the vehicles that he's in become, keep sort of upgrading. Tell me about this. How did you go from 240 to 100?
So these montages you see, it's funny. They were like 4-minute long scenes each. Like the shot where he goes into the tunnel and he's breaking a tunnel. There was like a whole scene around it where he breaks, he falls, and he's tired. He wakes up the next morning and he's still in the tunnel. And I was like, okay, this is not going anywhere. I don't need to see this for four minutes, right? The same goes with every shot in that montage. The grandmother, the scene right before that, the grandmother, right? The scene right before that, the grandmother becomes a tree, which was really coolly incorporated as an idea. But what happened in the scene after, because of shooting constraints, they didn't get their dialogues right, So since this character was completely VFX, I went to like the directors and said, hey, can you rewrite these? Because we have only 4 shots here. We don't have all these shots. You all haven't got them. They're out of focus, or the camera is moving, or whatever, the shooting constraints. So that's the place I found where we could, build a montage to show how he's growing. Because we had a lot of beautiful shots Pankaj shot, and they are beautiful. I mean, I'm very happy someone shot something so pretty, right? But they made absolutely no sense in the large context because the story wasn't going forward. In fact, in all of our screenings, people weren't understanding, is he becoming richer? I can't see it. They were like, oh, the house is so dark. I can't see his wealth. How do you show wealth? Either you show like a shiny house or something. So we had that problem. That was the first point which came to us. And if you see the scene, the grandmother is underlaying some dialogues, right? In the montage. So when you do a fantasy or a horror, there are rules of the game, right? You need to say, hey, don't go there. There's a ghost there. Don't go here. None of that was incorporated on script level. I had to read it in. I was like, how can this character be a stubborn guy if he wasn't, told don't go there? And these are the rules. You go there, don't touch the atta, climb fast, do this, do that. All that we used in montage to set the rules, because fantasy needs it. Fantasy and thriller needs it. A horror works saying that house has a ghost, don't go, and your actor will go. So the same thing went with this. So this film specifically had so many scenes if you see any of the montages through the film, I actually treat that whole film as a huge montage. If you ask me, people think I'm stupid. I'm like, where are the dialogues? I just like moved, right? We had to just swiftly move because within we stopped, we would be caught. That's how horrors work. That's how thrillers work, right? Within you stop, the audience is already thinking, but before that, I need to do a bang. So in this film specifically, we struggled with lots of scenes which spoke a lot about capitalism and feudalism and all these ideas. But the audience which is going to watch this film is specifically young. We were very clear, this is young, this is video gamers, this is people who love new age stuff, people who enjoy fantasy, and also who can watch gore. Gore is not something people can, explore into. Yeah. So that film had so many scenes which went to 2 shots montage. All the montages are 2 shots now. And we're like, okay, he's gone here, he's gone here, he's gone here, he's tired. Okay, like we had to create these 3 montages to show wealth, reduce wealth, and get there. That's what else to do? What else do we do? Because the problem is your character is buying gold and I can't see his wealth. What do I do? So I said, let's use metaphoric shots. Let's just do it. You've given me all the shots. And I really like Pankaj. He shot everything in the world. I said, great. Like even the scenes where he's talking about wealth, right? He's saying, oh, you've got only 2 coins, right? So there was a rule in that also that every time he goes, he doesn't come with the same number of coins. And we're like, oh, fuck, how do we set this up now? Right. Because there is no conversation saying that, hey, every time I go, I come back with 2 coins or 5 coins or 7 coins because it's a trick to it. Nobody knows about it. We had to put all of these in montages and put in the dialogues and build it, And the bigger problem why I got into it as the creative producer is the VFX. Initially, they thought it's going to be all prosthetics. For whatever reason, the prosthetics didn't come through properly, right? Because of no budget, multiple reasons, right? We had to go all 3D. And no studio in the country was approving it because there are no markers. VFX need markers for it to get back. No markers through the film. And the film had every take I had was 20 minutes long. I had to pick a portion of Hastar, put it. Like, okay, he's dancing, yeah, he looks scary. We can make it in VFX. Let's put it. That's how we had to build all of that because for whatever reason. And I had to see the film right from the edit till the VFX, which we got to, the company in Sweden who helped us do it are the most amazing people I met. They created a little software for us to be able to do this. They faked the texture, They said, okay, we can fake this texture with lighting. We needed to look gooey, right? We said, oh, we wanted to be gluey, we want slime. So it was shot with a lot of atta and, flour. It dried up, but this character is looking at slime and they created stuff for us. But I was involved right from there till the end because who else would do the VFX because I knew all my takes by heart. And
is that normal for you, Sanyukta? Do you normally know your takes by heart?
Yeah, I mean, I do have this problem because, I know my takes and I know which I love already. I always know which I love. But in this film, the problem was there were 18-minute takes. The camera was just moving because they thought handheld would work. And if you see, this might be the only cool VFX film which has handheld camera. VFX people are so scared. They're like, no, I want static. I'm like, yeah, we've not shot it. You're going to get this. Try to figure this out. Everyone rejected it. And we got lucky that, we were able to build it as it's worked for people at the moment,
Let's talk about Paatal Lok. You said that episode 3 of Paatal Lok completely changed from script to screen. In what way?
So with Sudeep, the cool thing is he does these readings, right? We all did the reading and stuff. On paper, it was 10 episodes. Okay. Within we had the last reading just before they went on shoot. It became 9. We were all throwing ideas. It became 9. I remember some writers met me saying, we are getting paid lesser than what we're supposed to get paid.
Correct.
Then, yeah, because they were paid for 10 episodes, right? So 9. And then they came back from the shoot. We still had 10 episodes. It was a lot of content. We moved 60 minutes of scene to get to where it is. 60 minutes of scenes. We had to. And episode 3, episode 3, actually in series, the thing is the episode 3 where the story opens up. first two are still set up. You know, it's episode 3 where all your characters are just there. They're naked now. I know them, right? I need to follow them. If you look up the script, what you guys have shared on Film Companion, episode 3, you can see it starts with a character. It starts with Ishwak, then it goes to Jaideep, then it goes to Ishwak, then it goes to Jaideep. It just didn't work on the paper. It didn't work on the table. Sudeep looked at it and he said, hey, this isn't working. I said, yeah, we need to finish one chapter and open the next chapter because they're very emotionally strong scenes. The Punjab sequence is so, it's so painful. I said, you have to open this, then go to the Chitrakoot. Otherwise, I'm not going to believe it or even empathize with it. I need to empathize with both my characters. Why are they so messed up, right? So specifically that episode, I didn't realize, Sudeep made me remember. He said, hey, you know, that scene, that episode, you completely just changed. You just went outside, came back, I said, hey, this is your edit, this is your film. You need to work on this, not the script. And Sudeep was like, yeah, absolutely, she's right. He's one of the easiest writers to work with, if I may say, because I find writers the most sensitive of them all.
Yeah.
So episode 3 specifically, if you read on paper, actually, it's just intercut drastically. It's intercut between Chitrakoot and Punjab. Now it's separate Punjab, it's separate Chitrakoot. That's specifically for the story.
Wow. Tell me, Sevta, do you think an editor can change a bad performance into a good one?
To quite a large extent, actually. You know, there are ways we do it, you know.
Tell us, reveal some secrets.
So, there are ways. There's something very new I just managed to do in a film. The actor within the camera would act very loud. I like my characters to be restrained, and so do the directors who pick me. They go like, no, I like restraint. I like that you're so, you know, cold and you're so, you know, we're watching them rather than, you know, hearing them scream. So we actually, through the film, have used the dialogues he's given to the other actors, you know, his back. If the camera's not on him, he's much better. So we've used all that on his face. I shouldn't even name this film, but you know, I spoke to the director. I said, they're going to ask me this. That's the only way I can get it. The whole film, I called the sound guy, said, hey, the sound's not going to sync. You know, because I've used dialogues from the back to balance it out. You know, that's one way of hiding. The other way is, you know, when there are supporting cast, nowadays the supporting cast is so good.
Yeah.
It's so easy. They're so good. I love them. They can fix anything for me. Yeah. I can just cut to them any minute and I'll get something from them. So that's one way of, you know, fixing performance. You know, and obviously it can work till 80%, but if the writing is flawed, I can't fix it beyond, right? If the writing is, because it's always the writing, then the direction, then the editing, right?
Basically, editors know all the dirty secrets.
Yes.
Hannah?
We know, yes, completely. All the dirty secrets, everyone's hard work, whatever everyone talks, you can just value or devalue them. But also at the same time, as an editor, I know I'm part of a team. We are all in it together and we are working for the film. I say this to all my directors. I said, hello, this is as much as mine as yours. I'm going to protect this baby as well. You know, I understand it's yours, but if I'm fighting with you, there's a reason. I'm not fighting because I don't like you or you don't like me. I'm fighting because this is not working for the benefit of the film.
Tell me, does the size and scale of a film impact on its editing? Meaning, if you're working on something which has a big star, would you automatically cut to showcase the star?
So, I don't function this way. I don't know why. Because as I told you, I'm very close to my supporting cast. I'm very close to performance. For me, it's always performance, right? If the script has been written in a certain way that every scene is of the actor, that's a different story I'll have to deal with. But usually I take multi-layered films where, you know, there are multiple things going on. But cutting to star is something I would refrain from, and I still am. I'm always, you know, I'm like cutting to story emotion, cutting to story. I'm usually trying to refrain from being in love with anyone in the film.
Right. Yeah.
You know, obviously when there are stars, people want to watch them. People love to watch them. And obviously I will put it there, but I don't cut per se for stars. I cut for story and emotion. For me, that's it. if story and emotionally doesn't work, it doesn't work. Or if it works, it works. And if the star has done magnificently well, I will definitely put it there as long as possible.
Tell me, as you were saying before, Sayuk, that editing and direction are so closely related. And some of the best directors we have, Rajkumar Hirani or Sanjay Leela Bhansali, were all, in fact, at the FTII editing. They were part of the editing batch. Does that mean that editors would naturally be good directors? Is that a logical extension of what you do?
I'm not fairly sure about that, because as an editor, I do know how to gauge performance. I do know how to read a script or what resonates or whatsoever, because it's the editing table is a naked studio. You can see everything there.
Yeah.
But the people skills what directors come with is the exact opposite of what editors come with.
This is true.
I deal with like 2 human beings a year.
Yeah.
They deal with 200 an hour. That skill, specifically the directors you've named, I'm sure they are like flamboyant people who know how to handle all the egos, all the friction, everything. Yeah. As an editor, we are irritated with like inanimate objects, right? And so I'm not sure if I can, dwell with it, but I do know that an editor who has the flamboyance will resonate to be a very good director, because they know what is bad performance, good performance, what are the mistakes, what happened, because it's the editing. I'm not sure I don't know. I mean, people in post are generally such shy people, and the way directors do it, it's amazing. I mean, I can't even deal with like 2 phone calls a day. That's how, that's why I sit alone, right? So this is one thing I always wondered when people would say, oh yeah, all good editors are good directors. I'm like, I don't know about that. Maybe like a little small film where there are like 5 people, but I don't think I can. I can't do it. No, because the director threshold is very, very strong. They are very good.
Yeah.
They are calm with like thousands of people on set.
Correct.
Without acting like a hero. You know what I'm saying? Without sitting on a horse or whatsoever.
Correct.
I tell this to all my directors. I said, I don't know how you do this, man. I mean, I can't. I can't do it. But yeah, if you have the flamboyance, then obviously it's easier for you to just shoot what you want and come back.
So how do people like us, regular people who just love the movies, how do we tell a good cut from a bad cut?
The best way to judge it is, if the film has emotionally worked with you and the story has worked with you and the film has moved and you've not even taken a break from the film, I think that's a good edit. I don't think grammar, lighting, camera, anything matters over, the straightforward storytelling. The basic of editing is keep your emotional graph straight. Don't break it. Keep it, keep going, be at it. Don't stop. So the only way for you to judge a good edit would be if it's emotionally completely kept you in tune and you've not switched off. And that happens with some really beautiful work, right? I mean, with series, it's just shocking how much we can watch. Like you can keep on watching for like straight 6 hours. It's shocking how good they are. And also structure has changed so much. There's no beginning, middle, end. You can start the film any way you want now. Yeah. So I don't think you can always say what is a good edit from a bad edit. I don't say it. I don't say it at all. But I do catch character flaws, as simple as if the character was sad 3 scenes before, how is he happy 3 scenes later? I make sure that 2 scenes later he's not going to be happy. Why is he happy? Then I need to show you that.
Right.
Yeah. That's the only way you can judge. And a lot of editing can be enhanced with good sound, good music. You know what I'm saying? Like sound changes the game so much. Like when we were even Tumbad and Patalok was so aggressive at our offline level. Within it, when it was sound, the sound designers made sure it's not as aggressive. You know what I'm saying? It changed. Yeah. So a lot of good, bad comes how you gauge it.
Hi, ma'am. Thank you for
Hi.
this wonderful session. So my question is basically that the most, as far as I know, the most important thing in a film, as far as editing is concerned, is honoring the time and space. So how difficult is it to show the passage of time in a film or the stillness in time in a film or in a show? Thank you.
It's actually not that difficult honoring the time and space. There are so many tricks you can do with that. There are so many tricks to manage time. You can fool time and extend time in films very easily. If that's what you mean to ask me, I mean, that's the question you asked me, right? So like, I'll give you an example of Ship of Theseus, right? I don't know if you've seen it, but we had to show the monk falling sick through the film, right? And we had multiple shots of them just walking around, him just walking around the city. We had to show that life has, come to a stop in a way. So we just cut to random pre-shots where it's just, if you see, there were just shots which Pankaj shot out of his window. And I was like, hey, I like it. I'm just putting it so that I know that his life has stopped. So there are tricks how you manage time and space. And it's up to the film. Is your film going to be fast or slow? You need to know this while you're reading the script. It doesn't come always on the, you know what I'm saying? When you get onto the edit table, you should know in the script, and you should have these conversations with the director saying, hey, where are you seeing this film? Is this Woody Allenish, or is this, Anurag Kashyap or whatever? You have to understand how they have dreamt it, because they are going to shoot what they've dreamt. But you have to be able to manipulate time and space, and actually don't get constrained with the larger timing of the film. I've never been affected by it. I'm like, let the film be 4 hours. It's okay. We'll hack it down. It's not a problem. You should never worry about the running time you were promised. Just make a good cut, make a good film, and then you can see what's not working. And everybody around you will react to it the way you need it.
An editor has to balance different worlds of a story. So how you balance the different world of a story?
What do you mean by different worlds of a story?
Like in Patal Lok, there are different worlds. Like Hathiram Tyagi hai, Hathiram ji hai, ek taraf Langda Tyagi hai. So
yeah.
how you
mean to say, how do I jump from locations and characters, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is what I meant when I started this conversation. We should always remember the emotional graph of the character. You have to remember, and also you need to know on paper level. So at paper level, I always write my scenes. Hathiram is doing this. Is he doing it twice? I don't need it. Let's take it out. Right. So same with, suppose I stopped at Hathoda Tyagi in his house, right? I'm like, I stopped his story with him being extremely angered. I can't, like I told you, I have to keep the emotional graph on. And that's the only way for us as an audience not to get confused with multi-characters and multi-layers. It's always the emotional graph. And also when you're doing jumping locations, your first shots in the next location should be a little longer. It has to be a little longer, because as an audience, I should not get thrown away wherever I landed because I've just got a blow from another location. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So my beginnings of the next scene will always be a little longer. It won't be instant. So that the audience is like, okay, I'm with Hathoda now. Okay, I'm going to Jaideep now. Okay, I'm going to, Chaku now. For that, you need to, but emotional graph, writing them on paper really helps. Is he crying in 4 scenes? I don't need it, right? What is the most important one? Take it out.
Sayukta, this was so lovely. Really, I hope you enjoyed it, because I know you are not somebody who likes to talk so much about her work, and you made an exception for us. So I really appreciate it.
How could I reject this? I was being stupid. I went home and I was like, hey, I can't say no to her. She, you are one of the only few, Film Companion is the only place where you'll have specifically picked my films, because I do little small things, and I was like, oh my god, someone is watching me. I was feeling so good. I was like, oh my god, she has noticed someone has cut it. She has noticed it. And you don't do that to everybody. You've done it to quite a few of us.
Thank you again, and thank you for the lovely stories that you are telling us. Really appreciate it, and we'll just looking forward to whatever you do next.